This painting is the culminating example of Parmigianino's intense artistic experiments in 1520s Rome. In the wake of the achievements of artists like Raphael and Michelangelo, Parmigianino experimented with this distortion of space and scale, the exaggerated elongation of figure, and this intense, almost artificial treatment of texture and surface to imbue his painting with a supercharged visual effect. What may seem strange and unnatural to us today was in fact deliberately used by Parmigianino in order to enhance the visual response and engagement of his viewer. And these characteristics would become part of the style later known as mannerism. This painting really marks a pivotal moment towards artist development in the later part of the 16th century. Hi, I'm Maria Alambritis and I'm a project curator here at the National Gallery. Today I'm going to be talking about this work, known generally as The Vision of Saint Jerome, and asking, how did this painting save its artist's life? This was painted by the artist Parmigianino between 1526 and 27. Parmigianino is a nickname meaning the little one from Parma, named after the northern Italian city where our artist was born on the 11th of January 1503 as Girolamo Francesco Maria Mazzola. From an early age, he showed a precocious talent, and in 1524 he set his ambitious sights on Rome. The city at the time was a magnet for young artists seeking to make their career. And it was there in Rome, at just 22 years old, that Parmigianino received the commission for this painting, the most important yet of his career. It was intended as an altarpiece for a chapel in the church of San Salvatore in Lauro, and at over 3.5 meters tall, extremely ambitious in scale and complexity. Now, Parmigianino was in Rome in May 1527 when Holy Roman Emperor Charles V invaded the city with thousands of troops and caused untold destruction and devastation. And it is this painting that is the focus of one of the most dramatic moments in all of the artist biographer Giorgio Vasari's Lives of the Artists. Vasari tells us that Parmigianino was at work on this very painting when the soldiers sacked the city. Yet he was so engrossed in his work that he was oblivious to the chaos ensuing around him, until a group of soldiers burst into his studio. And they were so astounded by this painting that they stopped in their tracks and allowed Parmigianino to keep working. Now, we know that Vasari is somewhat prone to exaggeration, but the fact remains that both artist and painting survived the sack of Rome, one of the most destructive events of the 16th century. Parmigianino fled Rome and never returned. His painting was hidden away for safekeeping and only recovered long after his death. Encountering the painting today, it certainly wields the same compelling effect. What is it that makes it so striking that, according to Vasari, it caused looting soldiers to stop in their tracks and spare the artist his life? Parmigianino is renowned as one of the most inventive and influential artists of the Italian Renaissance and a supremely gifted draftsman. Approximately 30 preparatory drawings survive for the Vision of Saint Jerome, demonstrated the concerted effort and experimentation he devoted to the project. What seems so effortless in the painting, this exaggerated elongation of proportion, the deliberate distortion of space and perspective, and this highly refined treatment of texture and surface, was in fact the result of a concentrated, elaborate graphic process. Looking at the painting, we can see why Parmigianino took his time to alight on a satisfying solution. He had to work with an unusually narrow panel on which he was requested to paint an image of the Virgin and Child with Saints Jerome and John the Baptist at her feet. Now, the patron for this altarpiece was a noblewoman from Città di Castello in Umbria named Maria Bufalini, who requested this altarpiece for the burial chapel of her husband Antonio and father-in-law Giovan Battista Cacialuppi. The contract, which survives today, gives only brief instructions. It's likely these saints were chosen for familial reasons. John the Baptist as the patron saint of Maria's father-in-law, Giovan Battista, and both Cacialuppi men were ecclesiastical lawyers, so Jerome was an appropriate choice as a saint related to the legal profession. The final painting, however, is a far cry from convention. Now, in Rome, Parmigianino studied the work of Raphael, Michelangelo, and the antique world closely. He had a voracious visual appetite, where everything he saw became transformed through his own idiosyncratic style. Parmigianino divides his composition in two, with the Virgin and Child above and the two saints below. But the space he had to work with was too narrow to fit both saints equally side by side without reducing them considerably in scale. So instead he developed this unusual asymmetric composition where he brings the Baptist forward and places him in this dynamic corkscrew posture. He spirals upwards, his elongated arm directing our attention to the Virgin and Child above. And then Jerome is reclined backwards, receding into the tangled foliage that threatens to overgrow him, and appears asleep. Now, this contrasting depiction of the two saints was highly unusual. Numerous sources and interpretations have been suggested for why Jerome has been depicted reclining and asleep. Parmigianino has certainly shown off his visual knowledge here. The figure of Jerome is inspired by Michelangelo's Ignudi, the male nude figures of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Now, at the time, one of the most common understandings of sleep was an idea perpetuated in the Florentine theologian and Platonist Marsilio Ficino's Theologica Platonica. This was published in 1482, and a new edition appeared in 1524. And Ficino discusses in his text that one of the ways in which the soul can detach itself from its corporeal form and approximate a state closer to divinity is through sleep. It's in this sleeping state that the soul can achieve something closer to divine transcendence. If we look at Jerome closely, he is not sleeping restfully. His body is contorted, his hands are gripped in a claw gesture around the flagellum and crucifix that he holds. He is in a state of ecstatic realization. And then we see just by him is this very prominent skull, the skull in which Parmigianino has placed Jerome's cardinal hat lodged between the jaw and the cranium. An appropriate reminder, particularly for an altarpiece intended for a funerary chapel, of the need for prayers for the soul of those in the afterlife. And then above we have the appearance of the Virgin and Child, but this is far from a sweet, harmonious vision. The Virgin is statuesque in her beauty. She is aloof and wears this shimmering, sheer, diaphanous drapery which reveals her body beneath, almost more in keeping for the clothing of a Venus rather than a virgin. And the Christ child is not a sweet baby infant, but a boisterous toddler with curly blonde locks who kicks towards us almost with exuberance as he takes his first steps away from his mother towards independence on the road to Golgotha. He rifles through the book on his mother's lap, the book representative of the Word made flesh, of his mother's foreknowledge of his fate, and he rifles through it as if it's of no concern to him. What is Parmigianino doing with this altarpiece in the mid-1520s in Rome? The city was riven with religious tension caused by the pressing cause of church reform, vocalized not least by the German theologian Martin Luther, who accused the church of corruption and led the way for Protestant Reformation. In this painting, Parmigianino responded to his patron's wishes, whilst also employing iconography in a way that would have responded to this intellectual and religious climate in Rome at the time. The statuesque Virgin is illuminated by this brilliant glow of light behind her and the crescent moon. Parmigianino has here depicted her in the guise of the woman of the Apocalypse, as described in John of Patmos's Book of Revelations 12. And this was one of the common ways that artists would depict the contested religious doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, the belief that the Virgin had been conceived free of original sin, apart from all humankind. Luther in particular was vociferous against such depictions of the Virgin. And in the city of Rome, the seat of the papacy, the use of such iconography was highly risky and had to be mediated carefully. So we can interpret Vasari's anecdote about this painting stopping looting soldiers in their tracks with something of an anti-Protestant gloss. This miraculous Madonna that stuns the soldiers into submission and moves into an act of mercy. And while intended for the salvation of the Cacilupi men's souls, as the soldiers burst into Parmigianino's studio in May 1527, Parmigianino would soon realize that his Roman masterpiece would be, in fact, the source of his own.